one thing is certain that I will say. The, book called March, Book 2, has lots of sayings about freedom rides. I'm sure this is the book that talks about freedom rides, but it also includes sit-ins at the beginning. And when I talked about theaters in the last book, I really meant this book. I read all 3 books before I make these videos, so I guess that means I got a little spoiling to do. Well, that happened, and right now I will have to say lots of things about the, freedom rides. It starts off, not the freedom rides, the book starts off with the sit-ins happening again. And the first scene is, John went ahead and decided to do lots of things at the Crystal. Well, it was a place, and we had to have sit-ins in. Turns out the 3 people there literally got alarmed by the police, and then John and his friend decided to go ahead to replace them. And then they were kind of annoyed, lots and lots of things, and lots of times, and they were told, "We're closed!" It was so clearly that they were open, and then they actually did the closing procedures. And that happened, and then they decided to turn on a fumigator, which was used to kill pests, and could possibly kill humans. And now we go to the theaters where black people, well, at least they call themselves black there, the Negro people, no, I'm not going to say that too. The African Americans, from the snake community, decided to, go ahead and buy a ticket to a show called The 10 Commandments. And it went horribly wrong. They would go back in line and try it again and try again because they literally had the tickets. They had the tickets. And they're like, no, next, no, next, no, next, no, next, no, next. You again, get out. All right, got into place. And the police came in and they literally beaten them up. They could have beaten them up to death. And then the next scene, one guy decided to come in and said, don't march. Here are the reasons. Here are all the obvious reasons. You don't want to die? Okay. Do not march then. And they're like, no, we're gonna march. And what do you think we should do about the police who are just as dangerous as some of the others? We're gonna march. And his response is like, we're gonna march. But then the guy calls John a sinner, and gets pride to them, and then they talk about sins and say, you are doing your sins, you're going yourself to death. And then, John responds like this, that I'm a sinner, but we're gonna march. And so that happens, and they decide to go ahead and march, and they went ahead, and 26 of them, including John, were arrested. And this was the first time, this wasn't the first time he was arrested, sure, of course, but so he spent his birthday, February 21st of 1961, his 21st birthday, in jail. And I'm pretty sure he kind of enjoyed it. They literally mocked the crowd, and they literally mocked everyone, because, hey, what you gonna do? Take away our mattresses? What you gonna do? Take away our toothbrushes? We don't care. I keep my soul. You'd say, I trade my soul for a mattress. No, I keep my soul. And they literally did all that, and they said, what you gonna do? You're gonna just put us in jail? You're gonna put us in jail? In jail. They said that, in jail. And when they were dehumanized by telling all of them to strip off their clothes, this happened. And come on, no underpants and everything that happened. And then said, what? And the one guy, turned out that guy named Colorful Jim Bevel, he'll keep it in perspective, saying, what's this up about clothes? Gandhi wrapped a rag around his balls and brought down the whole British Empire. And I guess that's one of the reasons that lots of people like clothes. Because they just don't want underwear. They don't want to act like Captain Underpants, minus the cape and the superpowers and the dumbness. Plus the smartness. And finally they were set free eventually, but it was worth it, to be honest, because finally they were able to organize the freedom rides. They were able to march, and everyone literally just beat them up, saying hey, we're the Klan, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and literally the Ku Klux Klan decided to do lots of things against them, saying, and a guy named George Wallace, who was, the U.S. Democratic presidential candidate, George Wallace, literally said this, and when he was during the governor time, and during the speech of becoming his, 1963 inaugural address, he said this, and I say that, in the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before defeated tyranny. And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And that is just a so terrible speech. Because literally, what is up with people in segregation? What's up? I mean, multiracial societies, what's wrong with them? Africa has lots of them. Oh, sort of lots of them. You can literally see, I mean, I've been in Egypt, and it's more like an Euro-Africa country, but it still has multiracial countries. I mean, they don't even have the same skin color, all of them. Sure, they have, like, the same tone, but they don't have all the same skin color. They don't really have anything in common, other than, I guess, their religion and their way of life and where they're living. So I guess that's what fueled John Lewis's belief, too. So that they are able to live like this, and so they can become one of the world's greatest people, and to live in one of the world's, well, so-called greatest societies, and to become it a great society to them and to everyone, so that the line segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever would not really stuck. I mean, segregation forever will definitely not stick here too, because I mean, people will eventually see the reason. And now enter Bull Connor, the infamous guy who was the chief of a police station that literally just brutalized everything. Luckily, well, everything was caught on camera, but no one convicted him because the courts loved him. And he was very, very determined to not let these continue. In fact, he literally went against a warrant saying, hey, this is for police actions, no violence, okay? And they're like, Jericho, well, you're all gonna get wet. There's sparks were turning on the houses. And that happened, and, like, that sort of went badly. And the next thing they knew, like, they didn't stop, and then this happened. Hey, turn on the hoses! And then they sent the dogs in, which literally destroyed everything. And then they started the Freedom Rides. In fact, this is a bus for the Freedom Ride. In fact, Freedom Riders seem to be all working out how they happened. And no one really liked anything to it. They let themselves go on buses and to themselves to get on places. And turns out that the one time the bus was stopped, literally, they were supposed to be checked, and the police were supposed to come. However, it turns out they later found out that the police agreed with the Ku Klux Klan that they get 15 minutes with the bus before, well, they came in and they trashed the whole place and killed everyone on it. And it was just a very violent thing to do. All they did was stop doing anything. I mean, how did the president not act on all these? I cannot imagine. Also, I can't imagine how Kennedy must have felt, Bobby must have felt. But Lyndon Johnson, he was the guy who did the Civil Rights Act. Why didn't he do anything? I'm sure he did something, but why didn't he do more? At least those are the questions Snake was asking. Personally, I actually think Lyndon did a pretty good job by signing the Civil Rights Bill, but I still think he could have done more. And I don't think he needed the approval of his people to do that. I mean, you could risk being beaten at in the White House to just get segregation gone. But then later on, I kind of realized that everyone likes segregation. Well, almost everyone in the South likes segregation. It was the heart of the monster. At least how one person called it. How are you supposed to do that without breaking your own political ties in your job? I mean, you do need a job after all. But still, at least protect them, will ya? Everyone later finds out that the government will not protect you. The government doesn't really care what happens to you, as long as you're doing on these. And turns out that we later find out that people, at least the prosecutors, split you guys into two groups if you're protesting. Niggers and white niggers. White niggers are considered nigger lovers, and they literally beat them more. They don't care. Like, if you're with them, you are a nigger. And one time, one person even sprayed black paint onto a person's face so that he looked like the African Americans, except just a way, way darker skin tone. And that guy responded with thank you and marched on. I guess I wouldn't have done that. I've been beaten up a lot. In my brain, at least. And I've been beaten so many times and everywhere that I pretty much don't really like it. I have rage inside me, and I probably would not have been best for this. Also, I hate dying, and I do not want to risk anything that leads me to dying. Which is, actually not a very pleasant thought. Later, after the Freedom Rides, well, at least when the Freedom Rides were officially over, and it ends with the bombing of a church during Sunday school. And then we cut to black, and we start book 3. Here's one thing that I want to discuss that probably enters your mind a lot too. Civil rights is a very important movement. However, one other thing that I have to really mention right now is the fact that the peacefulness of these movements is the thing that made it powerful. Powerfulness of peace is that if you're peaceful, anyone will think that you can do anything. I mean, some people actually think that it's okay to beat back. If you're beaten, you can beat them back. Just fair and fair. But then I realize life isn't fair. Beating them back just means that you're as bad as they are. And you don't want to do that. Like all those novels and those books, like in Harry Potter, you have to kill a person. But you don't. Because that means you're just as bad as they are. Except maybe Voldemort. He had to die, or else he can just reborn himself. He can just reborn himself and just come back to life, and that is so terrifying that I guess you'll have to permanently kill him. But other than that, I guess it's just that those types of stories tell you everything. That if you do what they do, you're just as bad as them, and you don't want to be just as bad as them. You want to be better than them. Also, they may not want to hear that, and they may not want to admit it. That's all I have to say. I guess I'll see you guys until book 3. Shannon out. Peace.